Hello, I'm Damien Barrett and welcome to Access All Areas, brought to you by OPSM. It's prelim final weekend, and with me to thrash out all the issues today is Lee Matthews and Matthew Richardson. And Lee, I'll start with you. I want to get your take on what's happening with the Port Adelaide coaching position.
Well, it seems like you've got to be desperate to coach to want to take the Port job. I mean, there's a keenness to coach, but at least the expectations are low at Port, but it seems like there's not a whole lot of candidates that are desperate to do it.
What do they do? I mean, they've on the public record as saying they wanted an experienced coach. They're just dropping. Every single one that they've targeted has dropped. They've either got someone already locked away or they're in real trouble, even more trouble than we thought. Is that a fair take, Richo?
Is there an element of guys putting their hand up and then being knocked back and it's sort of tarnishing their reputation for jobs in the future, so they sort of pull themselves out if they get any inkling that they're not going to get it?
Because there's a strong vibe someone has actually accepted the job, isn't there? It's just that person hasn't become public.
There's a lot of unknown about Leon Cameron's involvement. He's, as we know, an assistant coach at Hawthorn, and because they don't want a disruption at all with what they're doing with their premiership campaign, that he's not going to get involved publicly. But there is certainly some talk. One thing I reckon they should be doing, and if I was Keith Thomas, I'd be picking up the phone right now and ringing your old mate, Lee, Dennis Pagan, just to ask him the question. He's still got unproven business or unfinished business in his own mind. Now,
he last coached in 07, so not that long ago. I mean, a lot of changes in the last 5 years. But
look, it's not Plan A. It's certainly not Plan A, and it's probably not even Plan E. But they are about that stage now. They're down to their fifth and sixth options. I'd be giving him a call. He's a premiership coach times two. He knows what he wants, but it's a different structure, I know. But I reckon it's worth a call. Hey, All Australian on Monday night. It's a highlight for any footballer to become in the team, but. What did you make of how it was presented to the public for the first time anyway, with the announcement of the team coinciding with the critique of the team by the people around it?
Well, I know that
they hated it.
Yeah, well, I know that the players in the room that had made the team, and they were the only players in the room, so they're sitting there having dinner, listening to the selectors justify why they were picked or why they, the reasons why they couldn't have made it, and I think players felt uncomfortable sitting there having their positions justified.
And if you're justifying why someone's in, you're virtually denigrating why someone's not in.
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought the whole thing was bad taste. I hated it.
Bad taste.
And I just thought if the chairman of the selection panel wants to give the views of the collective views of the selection, because they're not one person's views.
Yeah.
They're not it's a collective view of 7 or 8 people on the committee. There's no right or wrong. It's their value judgment, and this crap about stats, well, just let the computer pick it. If you want to just worry about stats and not human judgment, let the computer pick it.
So an over-reliance or emphasis on the stats backing up the selection, is that what you're saying?
Well, I
over
think
the
people
top?
say Sam Jacobs should be ruckman because he had the most hit-outs to advantage. Well, on that basis, Jack Riewoldt have to be full forward because he kicked the most goals. I mean, it's more than stats. You've got to have some judgment.
I think it was a way of people defending their selection. If you've got a stat that can back that up, you use it. But I'm with you, Lee. Just go with your gut.
I'm all for critical analysis, but there's a time and a place for it, and I don't think the actual announcement of the team was the right time for that critique of the team. But give us a couple of guys you would have had in that weren't in the 22, and obviously give us the ones you take out as a result of that.
Well, I personally wouldn't have had Dean Cox as the forward pocket second ruckman. I would have gone to more the forward like Drew Petrie is probably still the best of the good forwards who can go and fill in the ruck.
And you're happy with...
Or Mitch Clark, but he only played the first half of the season, so he would have been out. So
happy with Nick Naitanui in the ruck?
Well, I might not have personally. No, I'm happy enough that the selection... I'm not going to criticise the selection group because that's their collective judgment. I'm not positive. I might have actually gone for Dean Cox as the first ruckman.
That would look, if you had to make one change, and you can justify everyone being in or out. I mean, 40 contenders, they're all worthy. But the one for me probably was Naitanui. I would have put Cox into the first ruck. I wouldn't have had a second ruckman in the team, and I would have put Pavlich into the forward pocket instead of Dean Cox. So not putting down Naitanui selection, he'll be All-Australian in the future, but I just thought maybe this year, Cox first ruck, Pav in the pocket, no Nick Naitanui.
I was really surprised to see Sam Mitchell not in that 22, but as you say,
Okay, who's the out?
Well, I'd probably take Rioli out.
Different position though. If you put Mitchell in, you've got to take out Kennedy or Watson.
Yeah, well,
because they're the same type of player.
If you want to replace a like for a like. But hey, Lee, Gavin Krzyzewski, really open interview this week with Eddie Maguire. Spoke of a reliance on alcohol and then drugs beyond that point throughout his playing career when you were coaching him, and also as he's an assistant coaching career. Did you have any inkling of the depth of?
No, did not at all. Of course, I coached Gavin up until 1995, so this was in the early part of apparently what Gavin exposed this week. Had no, I mean, the Saturday night drinking was what everybody did back in that era. back 20 years ago, but had no idea there was any sort of drugs that he was sort of partaking. So no, complete surprise, I think, to everybody at Collingwood up until the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Richo, is this still an issue? Players, even right now, with all the mechanisms in place, dealing with these sorts of problems?
I think the right mechanisms are in place, but when you've got a large percentage of players, what have we got, 700 players in the AFL? There's always going to be a couple of young guys that make a mistake. You're never going to totally get rid of it, but I believe the system that they have is working now.
Remember, there was no drug testing back then.
There was none at all,
there's no doubt the drug testing has to give you more chance of actually finding out, and therefore the player being
Well, I
forced to
started
deal
playing
with it.
in 1993, and I reckon the first 7 or 8 years of my career, I had no exposure to illicit drugs at all. And then you could start seeing it creeping in a little bit after that, in society in general, and football's a part of that.
Hey, the prelim finals, Collingwood and Sydney tonight. They've ridden an emotional rollercoaster, Collingwood, with the John McCarthy passing, the funeral yesterday, Lee, and then travelling to Sydney for the prelim final. How much are they going to get out of what they are experiencing as a group with this tragedy?
Well, it is really interesting because the whole psychology of it, I mean, everything's a negative for Collingwood, except what I call the bonding of shared adversity.
Yep.
Whether it's shared pain or shared suffering or shared loss. I mean, it's like soldiers who are in the war. They have this enormous bond because they share this moment. And that's the plus, I guess, for Collingwood in a footy sense. But everything else is a negative. The 6-day break, the travel, the whole emotional roller coaster they've been on.
They don't have, unfortunately, the ability to remove the life and death situation that this is away from the footy situation. They dealt with it last week when he passed away. Is the cumulative effect of this grief something that's going to come out and work against them tonight?
I think it's going to be more the 2 tough games that they've played that will work against them tonight. I think with Lee they will have bonded together, and it's been a tough few weeks with John's passing. But I just think the 2 tough games, the 6-day break, the Swans having had a 13-day break, it has to take a toll, I reckon, late in this game tonight, and we'll find out.
What would you be thinking about the streak? I reckon once a streak gets to double figures, it becomes a millstone for the team who's won the streak, like Collingwood.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you think, geez, if you think about it, which I don't think about it that much, if you think about it, you think, we're not going to beat them for 30 times in a row. This is really starting to
You're
work
waiting
against
for it
us.
to end, sort of thing. Yeah.
Hey, Collingwood had a lot of changes from the last time they played the Swans, as have the Swans. It was a great game in round 20. Richo, analyse this for us. Tell us who wins out of these changes from the last time they played.
Well, Collingwood looked to me, out of those ins and outs, they've definitely had a win. Swan, cracker, Goldsack, a versatile player. But then you go down to Sydney and, look, Reid is a huge in. He's a target up forward. Bolton's a warrior, 300 games champion. Mitch Morton's the one. He was good in that first final. Do they get a win with him coming back in? That's the one you have the question mark over. If you had to give someone a tick there, maybe Collingwood just, but some big ins for Sydney as well.
OK, who wins?
I'm going for Sydney. I just think the 13-day break against the 2 tough weeks Collingwood have had and a 6-day break, I think it has to have a toll.
Yeah, for the same reasons, Sydney. As Richo,
Let's go to the other game, Hawthorn and Adelaide. There's various parts of the ground where this game will be won and lost. The midfield battles, though, will loom as key, won't they?
I think that's the biggest one in the ground. You've got the number 1 versus number 2 clearance team in the competition in the midfield area, and there's Sam Mitchell. He's the leader along with Brad Sewell. But if Hawthorn get first use, then you're just about no chance of beating them, Lee, because of their kicking efficiency once they get it.
Absolutely. But the one thing, the Crows' hope is that Jacobs in the ruck and Dangerfield and Sloane and Thompson that can really win those stoppage areas. And I reckon Dangerfield has to have a really big game. He's a really influential player, but he has to have a really big game, I would have thought. If they break even in the clearances, you think Hawthorn will be too good in most other parts of the ground.
Is Adelaide equipped, though, to break even? And if they do, does that set it up?
Well, I think they are equipped, clearly. And the stats...
The 1v2, Lee.
The 1v2, yeah.
They're the hard nuts we've just looked at, the cream. What about the outside runners, Lee? Because they will have a shaping of this game as well, won't they?
Well, Hawthorn, because Mitchell and Sewell are their inside players, their actually run comes from the lesser lights, probably. The Isaac Smith, who we just saw give the ball to Clint Jones, who's actually, Clint Young, I should say, who's actually a really good user of the footy. So those runners outside Not the big names for Hawthorn, but really important.
No, they're very important. Clinton Young particularly, because he's got the ability to kick long goals on the run coming through 50. Here he does it on his right foot. We don't see that very often, but he's going to be a real plus coming in tonight. And don't forget Jordan Lewis. He is a goal kicker. He gives him the ability to rotate through the midfield, and just too strong, Hawthorn.
Richo, who gets Taylor Walker in this game?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because earlier in the year, Taylor Walker was matched up by Josh Gibson, who did a good job, but I tend to think it may be Schoenmakers tonight, and Gibson will go to Tippett and just roll off him and help Schoenmakers out. But there's a school of thought that Clarko likes to stick with past plans, and if that's the case, then it might be the other way around.
Well, the last time we saw Hawthorn's defence under real pressure, remember against Geelong, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks ago, when Hawkins and Podsiadly just looked too big and strong for Schoenmakers and Gibson. So that's probably one of the hopes for the Crows. At least they've got two big... I mean, Tippett hasn't been doing much, but if the two big forwards fire on the same night...
Tippett has to attract the footy on Saturday if they're going to have any chance, because if he doesn't, it's just going to be all onto Walker, and Hawthorn will be all over that.
Sure. What about at the other end? Who gets Buddy? Rutten did a really good job last week, didn't he, on Pavlich in the absence of Talia?
I was talking, like, Richo was basically the Franklin of a few years ago, the big guy who could run, and you always had this problem. Do you play someone on Richo, and the same with Franklin, who can compete with him in the marking contest or can run with him around the ground? And mostly you said, well, we're not going to be able to stop him all around the ground. Let's get someone on him who can make sure he can't mark and have set shot goals, which probably is Rutten for Franklin on that scenario.
Definitely Rutten, and the main job for Rutten will be to just make sure that he can negate Franklin inside 50. If he starts getting up to the wings, then Rutten can just probably drop off a little bit.
But he won't be able to go with him up to the wings, though, will he, Richard?
No, he'll go with him to the 50-metre line, and then they may roll it over, or he may just wait for him and let him go up.
OK, Adelaide, any chance at all? Bookmakers say no. There's just no chance.
I think there's more chance because I think Hawthorn have got the best upper level, so you'd pick Hawthorn against anyone. But the Crows are a good team. Oh, you've got to pick Hawthorn. All the logic says that, but I don't think they're over the line in no scenario.
Yeah, it won't be the biggest.
Is there a wild card they need to do in order for the upset?
Look, I don't think there will be an upset, no. I think it's Hawthorn. Maybe not by as much as what some people predict, but the Hawks will be too good.
Yep. Time now for the result of our OPSM poll from Monday, where we asked, should we have a night grand final? The traditionalists have spoken yet again on this one, 27%. Want a night grand final, and 73% say they want to keep it in the daytime. I've changed my views on this, guys. I reckon the night's the way to go.
We're a conservative population. That was the same numbers for don't change any rules ever. Ever again, don't change the rules.
So, hey, thanks, Richo. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. I'll be back with Luke Darcy and also Richo on Monday's edition of Access All Areas. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.